bad traffic. We feel stressed. Someone praises us. We feel worthy. Someone ignores us. We feel invisible. The pattern runs so deep we don't even see it as a choice. We check our phones first thing in the morning, needing that hit of validation. We scroll through others' lives, measuring our worth by comparison. We wait for the weekend to feel relief, for vacation to feel peace, for retirement to feel free. Always waiting, always depending on circumstances to change before we can be okay. We've been operating this way for so long that we don't think there's another way to function in the world. The steering wheel is right in front of us, but we've forgotten we can actually steer. If this resonates, share where you're listening from in the comments below. Get comfortable. Wrap yourself in something soft if you'd like. We're about to explore what happens when you take back what's always been yours. The things we think will save us come with a price we never see coming. There's a trend happening right now among ambitious professionals and entrepreneurs. People are paying $100,000, sometimes $200,000, just to have dinner with a successful millionaire. One meal, a few hours of conversation. They see it as an investment, and in some ways, it is. They're buying access to shortcuts, to wisdom earned through decades of trial and error, to the formula that took someone else years to figure out. They want the map, so they don't have to wander blindly through the territory. And there's nothing wrong with seeking guidance. The desire to learn from those who've walked the path before us is natural and intelligent. These dinners can genuinely provide value, practical strategies, business insights, connections that might take years to build on your own. But let's look at what they're actually getting. Best case scenario, and this is if everything works out perfectly, if you implement every piece of advice flawlessly, if the market cooperates, if luck is on your side, you achieve economic freedom for 20 or 30 years of your life. Maybe you build a successful business that generates passive income. Maybe you master the stock market's patterns well enough to secure your retirement. Maybe you create wealth that gives you options most people never have. The ability to say no to jobs you hate, to take time off when you need it, to help your children get started in life. That's the dream they're buying into. And it's not a foolish dream. Economic security matters. Having resources provides genuine relief from certain kinds of suffering. But wealth doesn't solve what it can't touch. Your body ages, regardless of your bank balance. Sickness arrives uninvited, whether you can afford the best doctors or not. Relationships end despite your ability to provide comfort and security. People you love die, and no amount of money negotiates with death. The ache of jealousy from others, the loneliness of success, the fear that comes with any diagnosis, these remain untouched by wealth. Most wealthy people, and this is something they rarely admit publicly, aren't actually happy. They have everything they thought they needed, and yet something essential remains missing. The goalposts keep moving. The first million was supposed to be enough, then 10 million, then 100 million, and somehow enough never arrives. And there are costs nobody mentions in those expensive dinners. The complexity multiplies with every asset. Properties need management companies. Businesses need oversight. Investments need monitoring. And each responsibility claims more mental space. You check portfolios before breakfast, worry about market fluctuations during meetings, make decisions based on tax efficiency rather than what actually matters to you. The lawsuits start coming. Someone slips on your rental property, and their lawyer sees an opportunity. A business partner feels cheated and files complaints. A former employee wants more severance. You spend money protecting money you already earned. Time in depositions, reliving conflicts you tried to prevent. Energy on situations that feel like extortion, but are cheaper than fighting. Trust becomes difficult. When someone is friendly, you wonder about their motives. When people offer help, you question what they want in return. Dating becomes complicated. Are they attracted to you or your lifestyle? Friendships strain under unspoken financial imbalances. You become guarded, suspicious, unable to relax into genuine connection because you've been burned by people who saw you as a resource rather than a person. And then there's the paradox of possessions owning you. The luxury car needs specific mechanics and climate-controlled storage. The vacation home generates bills even when empty. Utilities, insurance, property taxes, landscaping, security systems that monitor a place you're too busy to visit. The art collection requires climate control, insurance riders, security consultants. You bought these things to enjoy, but they claim your attention and time more than you claim them. Buddhist teaching points to something we'd rather not acknowledge. Everything put together eventually comes apart. The business you spent decades building can fail when markets shift. The investment strategy that worked for 20 years becomes obsolete when technology disrupts entire industries overnight. The body you trained eventually protests. The runner's knees give out. The executive's heart reveals accumulated stress. Not as punishment, but because this is how conditioned things work. Understanding this isn't pessimism. It's seeing clearly what external solutions can and cannot provide. There's an ancient story that illustrates this perfectly. King Pasenadi ruled a prosperous kingdom in northern India during the Buddha's time. He had everything: wealth beyond measure, power over vast territories, respect from neighboring kingdoms, a palace filled with luxuries most people couldn't imagine. Every meal was a feast prepared by the finest cooks. Musicians performed for his entertainment. Servants attended to his every need. He could have anything the moment he desired it. And King Pasenadi loved to eat. He would consume enormous quantities at every meal, plates piled high with delicacies, servants bringing more dishes before he'd finished the previous ones. He ate past fullness, past satisfaction, simply because the food was there and tasted good, and he had the power to have as much as he wanted. Over time, the king grew obese. His body became heavy. His breathing labored. He needed help standing from his seat. Walking any distance left him exhausted. Sleep became difficult, as his breathing would sometimes stop entirely until he jolted, awake, gasping. But even experiencing this suffering directly every single day, he couldn't stop. The next meal would arrive, and he would eat the same way again, caught in a pattern he couldn't break, despite having all the willpower required to rule a kingdom. One day, after a particularly heavy meal, the king visited the Buddha. He sat down to listen to a teaching on moderation and mindfulness, and then fell asleep right there, still sitting up, unable to keep his eyes open from the weight of what he'd consumed. The Buddha looked at him with compassion. Here was a man who had everything the world says you need to be happy, and yet he sat there trapped in his own body, by his own choices, unable even to stay awake. When the king woke up embarrassed, the Buddha didn't lecture or shame him. Instead, he offered something simple, a short verse the king could remember during meals. When a person is always mindful, knowing moderation in the food they eat, their suffering decreases, they age slowly, and they protect their life. The Buddha asked a young attendant named Sudarsana to memorize this verse and recite it to the king at the beginning of every meal. King Pasenadi agreed to try. Every time he sat down to eat, young Sudarsana would stand nearby and recite the verse. At first it made little difference. The king would hear the words, nod politely, then eat exactly as he always had, the familiar pattern, too strong to interrupt with mere words. But gradually, hearing the same reminder every single day, something began to shift. He started to pause before automatically reaching for another serving. He began noticing the exact moment when his body had enough, even though his mind wanted more. He practiced putting down his fork when satisfied rather than stuffed, which at first felt almost painful, like denying himself something he deserved. Slowly, over many months, the king lost weight. His body became lighter, more mobile. He could move easily, breathe deeply, think clearly. Sleep came naturally again. He could walk through his palace gardens without exhaustion, climb stairs without needing to stop and rest. But more than the physical changes, something inside him had fundamentally shifted. He realized that no amount of food, possessions, power, or pleasure had ever touched the emptiness he felt inside. He'd been trying to solve an internal problem with external solutions, and it had never worked because they addressed different dimensions of experience entirely. The problem wasn't that he needed more or better food. The problem was that he was looking in the wrong place for something that could only be found within. This is what happens when we chase external solutions for internal restlessness. You can have the feast and feel empty. You can have the wealth and feel insecure. You can have the success and feel inadequate. You can have the relationship and feel lonely. Because the restlessness isn't asking for more things, it's pointing to something missing in how you relate to your own experience, to your own mind, to this present moment. So where do we look instead? Buddhist wisdom points to something that sounds almost too simple. The peace you're seeking isn't something you need to acquire from outside yourself. It's something you already possess that you've forgotten how to access. Like King Pasenadi had the ability to eat mindfully all along, but needed help, remembering it was even possible. This isn't about rejecting success or wealth or achievement. It's about understanding their limits. Money can buy comfort, but not contentment. Success can bring respect from others, but not self-respect. Achievement can prove your capability, but not your worth as a human being. Pleasure can distract from discomfort, but not resolve the underlying restlessness. There is a kind of well-being that doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. A peace that remains accessible whether you're rich or poor, healthy or sick, praised or criticized, succeeding or failing. This isn't fantasy or spiritual bypassing or pretending difficulties don't hurt. This is what the Buddha taught, based on his own direct experience, what thousands of practitioners have verified through their practice, what's available to anyone willing to look inward rather than outward, at the mind itself rather than at what the mind is grasping for. The people paying $200,000 for dinner with a millionaire are seeking something genuine, wisdom about how to navigate life successfully, guidance from someone who's figured things out, a path that leads somewhere better. They're not wrong to seek guidance. They're just not being offered the most valuable guidance available, the kind that addresses the root of restlessness rather than just rearranging its symptoms, the kind that leads to peace regardless of external conditions, rather than happiness dependent on circumstances cooperating. There's something far more valuable than that millionaire's secret, and it doesn't cost anything at all. Imagine you found Aladdin's lamp. You rub it, the genie appears, and you have 3 wishes, anything you want. What would you wish for? Most people know immediately. Financial security, health for loved ones, success in their work, maybe attractiveness, talent, recognition. The specifics vary, but the pattern is the same. We wish for external things we believe will make us happy. How much would you pay for that lamp? How much is it worth to have your deepest wishes granted? Some people would give everything they own for just 1 wish, let alone 3. But there's a problem built into the very nature of wishes. Everything the genie can give you is temporary. The wealth can be lost in a market crash. The health can fade with a single diagnosis. The success can evaporate when industries change or younger competitors arrive. The relationship can end. The beauty fades with time. Even if the genie granted you perfect circumstances, those circumstances are composed of impermanent elements that will eventually come apart. Buddhist teaching points to something more valuable than any wish a genie could grant. Not more valuable in a vague spiritual sense, but practically more valuable for your actual day-to-day experience of being alive. What if, instead of depending on circumstances to be happy, you could be happy regardless of circumstances? What if instead of needing life to go a certain way to feel okay, you could feel fundamentally okay, whether life goes your way or not? This sounds impossible to most people. It sounds like fantasy, like something monks claim but don't actually experience, like spiritual propaganda that doesn't hold up in real life. But there's a story from the Buddhist texts that shows just how real this possibility is. One day, the Buddha gathered his disciples and asked a question: "Who among you has unshakable concentration?" This was not a casual question. The Buddha was asking who among his students had developed a quality of inner stability so profound that nothing could disturb it. Who had found that unshakable peace we're talking about? Sariputta, one of the Buddha's closest disciples, known for his wisdom and insight, spoke up. His answer was remarkable. "Lord, my concentration is unshakable. Even if the entire world were to be destroyed, if the earth itself were to split apart, if the oceans were to boil away, if the sky were to collapse, it would not disturb my peace." Let that sink in for a moment. Sariputta wasn't saying he'd found a nice meditation technique that made him feel calm sometimes. He wasn't saying he'd learned to relax when things were going well. He was saying that he'd developed such profound inner stability that even the complete destruction of the world wouldn't shake his peace. This sounds like arrogance, or delusion, or exaggeration, but it wasn't. The Buddha didn't correct him or suggest he was being grandiose. Instead, the Buddha acknowledged that yes, this was accurate. Sariputta had indeed developed that level of unshakable inner peace. How is this even possible? Sariputta had discovered something fundamental about the nature of mind and experience. He'd learned that the peace he was experiencing didn't depend on external conditions being a certain way. It didn't come from the world being safe or pleasant or predictable. It came from a profound shift in his relationship to experience itself. When most of us encounter difficulty, we resist it. We tense against it, fight it, wish it were different, tell ourselves stories about how it shouldn't be happening. That resistance is where suffering lives. Not in the difficulty itself, but in our relationship to it. Sariputta had learned to meet experience without resistance, not by becoming passive or numb, but by developing such clear awareness that he could witness even intense experiences without being overwhelmed by them. He could feel pain without adding suffering on top of it through resistance. He could face loss without adding despair through clinging. He could encounter pleasant things without adding anxiety through grasping. This is what allowed him to say that even world destruction wouldn't disturb his peace. Not because he'd become inhuman or uncaring, but because he'd found something within awareness itself that remains stable, regardless of what's appearing in awareness. Think about it this way. When you watch a movie, you can experience intense emotions, fear during horror scenes, sadness during tragic moments, joy during happy endings. But underneath all those changing emotional experiences, there's an awareness that's simply witnessing them without being destroyed by them. You can cry at a sad movie and still be fundamentally okay. The sadness is real, but it's not threatening your basic well-being. Sariputta had learned to relate to life itself the way you relate to a movie, fully experiencing whatever arises without identifying with it so completely that his sense of well-being depends on it. This is what practice builds. Not immunity to pain or difficulty, but a fundamental shift in your relationship to them that makes you unshakable, even when life shakes everything around you. And this isn't fantasy. This capacity exists within human consciousness. Sariputta wasn't special or superhuman. He was simply someone who practiced with dedication and discovered what becomes possible when you train your mind systematically. What he found is available to anyone willing to look in the same direction and do the work. This kind of peace works whether you're rich or poor. It doesn't require comfortable circumstances. In fact, some of the most peaceful practitioners have lived in extremely difficult conditions. It works whether you're alone or surrounded by people, whether you're young with your whole life ahead or old with most of it behind you, whether you're healthy or dealing with chronic illness. The difference between conditional and unconditional happiness is the difference between a lamp that needs to be plugged in and a lamp with its own internal power source. Conditional happiness requires the right circumstances, good health, financial security, pleasant relationships, comfortable conditions. When you have those things, you feel happy. When you lose them, happiness disappears. You're constantly at the mercy of conditions beyond your control. Unconditional well-being is different. It doesn't mean you prefer pain to pleasure, or that you don't have natural human preferences. It means that underneath those preferences, there's a fundamental okayness that doesn't depend on getting what you prefer. You can still work toward goals, build things, create comfort, but your basic peace doesn't hinge on those efforts succeeding. Now, hearing about Sariputta's unshakable peace might create the wrong impression. You might think this requires becoming a monk, renouncing the world, spending years in caves, meditating. You might think it's only for spiritual athletes, willing to give up everything for practice. But there's another story that shows this isn't true. Chitta was a householder, not a monk, not a renunciate, not someone who'd left society to pursue enlightenment. He had a family, ran a business, dealt with all the ordinary complications of daily life that you deal with. He had to earn money, manage relationships, navigate conflicts, make difficult decisions. His life looked a lot like yours probably does. But Chitta was also a practitioner. He took the Buddha's teachings seriously and integrated them into his ordinary life. He didn't wait until retirement to practice. He didn't tell himself he'd get serious about meditation once his business was established or his kids were grown. He practiced right in the middle of his messy, complicated, demanding life. During his work, while buying goods, negotiating prices, managing employees, handling customers, Chitta practiced mindfulness. Not as some separate activity he did when he had free time, but as a quality of awareness he brought to whatever he was already doing. He learned to stay present during transactions instead of getting lost in worry about profits. He practiced noticing his reactions to difficult customers instead of just acting them out. He found moments of stillness even in the middle of the marketplace. And something remarkable happened. Chitta developed the ability to enter deep meditative states, not just while sitting in quiet rooms, but right in the middle of his ordinary activities. He could be negotiating a business deal and simultaneously rest in profound peace. He could be managing a conflict between employees and remain inwardly undisturbed. The Buddha heard about Citta's practice and praised him as one of the greatest lay disciples. Not because Citta had renounced the world, but because he'd found a way to practice deeply without renouncing anything. He proved that you don't need to choose between living fully in the world and developing profound inner peace. Chitta showed that the marketplace can be as much a place of practice as a monastery. Your kitchen can be as valuable as a meditation hall. Your office can serve your awakening as much as a retreat center. The question isn't where you practice, but whether you practice, whether you bring awareness to the moments that make up your life. What made Citta's practice possible was a shift in understanding. He stopped seeing spiritual practice as something separate from daily life, something you do when you have free time or after you've handled your responsibilities. He started seeing every moment as an opportunity. The moment you wake up, the moment you speak to your partner, the moment you feel frustrated in traffic, the moment you make coffee. Every single moment offers a choice about where you place your attention and how you relate to your experience. Most people spend their whole lives waiting for the right conditions to practice. They tell themselves they'll start meditating once things calm down at work. They'll begin a serious practice once the kids are older. They'll really commit to it once they retire and finally have time. But things at work never fully calm down. Kids bring different challenges at every age, and retirement brings its own complications. Chitta didn't wait. He worked with the life he had, practicing in the gaps and pauses, bringing awareness to the ordinary moments that most people overlook. And through that approach, he developed a depth of practice that earned praise from the Buddha himself. The contrast between these two stories tells you something important. Sariputta shows you what's ultimately possible, peace so profound that even world destruction wouldn't shake it. That might seem unattainable, but it points to the direction practice leads when you follow it far enough. It shows you there's no limit to how deep this peace can go. Chitta shows you what's immediately accessible, the possibility of practicing right where you are, with the life you actually have, without needing to wait for perfect conditions or make dramatic changes. He proves that you don't need to be a monk, or quit your job, or move to a monastery. You just need to begin, right here, with whatever moment you find yourself in. Together, these stories reveal something that changes how you might think about your own life. The treasure of unshakable peace isn't something reserved for special people or extraordinary circumstances. It's not hidden in far-off monasteries or accessible only after years of intensive retreat. It's available right now in your ordinary life, if you know where to look and how to practice. This is more valuable than any wish a genie could grant, because it doesn't depend on circumstances cooperating. The genie can give you health, but you'll still worry about losing it. The genie can give you wealth, but you'll still fear it running out. The genie can give you a perfect relationship, but you'll still feel the anxiety of potential loss. Every gift from the genie comes with the built-in suffering of impermanence. But the peace that comes from practice, that's yours. In a way, nothing external can ever be. No one can take it from you. No market crash can destroy it. No illness can steal it. No loss can erase it. Because it's not built on conditions that can change. It's built on a shift in how you relate to conditions, which remains stable even when conditions themselves are unstable. But here's where it gets counterintuitive: how happiness actually works. We operate under a simple equation that seems obvious. More satisfied desires equals more happiness. If getting what you want feels good, then getting more of what you want should feel even better. If satisfying one desire brings relief, then satisfying 10 desires should bring 10 times the relief. This makes perfect sense, and it drives almost every decision we make. We keep adding to the list of what we need, not just to survive, but to feel okay, to feel satisfied, to feel like life is working. But watch what actually happens when you follow this equation. Imagine someone, let's call them person A, who has 100 requirements for a good day. Not ridiculous things, just normal preferences that seem reasonable. The coffee needs to be hot and taste right. The commute needs to go smoothly without delays. Co-workers need to be pleasant and respectful. The work itself needs to feel meaningful, or at least not frustrating. Their boss needs to recognize their efforts. Lunch needs to be satisfying. The afternoon needs to have some energy, not just dragging exhaustion. The drive home needs to be clear, not stressful. Their partner needs to greet them warmly. Dinner needs to turn out well. The evening needs to have some relaxation without obligations piling up. They need to feel like they accomplished something today. Their body needs to feel decent. No headaches, no unexpected aches, no digestive issues. Sleep needs to come easily without lying awake worrying. And that's only 15 of 100 requirements. There are 85 more conditions that need to align for this person to end their day feeling satisfied. Now imagine person B, who has 5 requirements for a good day. They woke up breathing. They had something to eat. They had shelter when they needed it. Their body moved when they asked it to. They witnessed one moment of something worth noticing. Light through a window, a bird outside, someone's laugh, warmth from their coffee, even if it wasn't perfect. Which person has better odds of ending their day satisfied? The mathematics here are brutal and unavoidable. Person A needs 100 different things to align correctly. What are the chances of that happening on any given day? Essentially 0. Something will always go wrong. Traffic will be bad. A coworker will be irritating. Their body will feel off. Dinner will be disappointing. Something won't meet the standard. They've guaranteed their own dissatisfaction through sheer probability. With 100 requirements, they're statistically doomed to disappointment. Person B needs 5 things, and all 5 are virtually guaranteed every single day. They'll wake up breathing. Check. They'll find something to eat. Check. They'll have shelter. Check. Their body will mostly cooperate. Check. One moment worth noticing? That's almost impossible to miss if you're even slightly paying attention. They're practically guaranteed satisfaction because their threshold is so achievable. Same world, same basic circumstances, completely different experiences of life. Not because one has better luck, but because one has made satisfaction almost impossible, while the other has made it almost inevitable. You can feel this in your own life right now. Think about a day recently when you felt disappointed, even though nothing terrible happened. Chances are, you'd built up requirements, maybe without even realizing it, and reality didn't meet them. The day was fine objectively, but it wasn't what you decided it needed to be for you to feel good about it. Now think about a time you felt genuinely content for no particular reason. Chances are you weren't requiring much in that moment. You were just present with what was actually there, without a checklist of conditions that needed to be met first. The equation we've been following is backwards. Happiness doesn't come from satisfying more desires. It comes from having fewer desires to satisfy in the first place. There's an old teaching from the Zen tradition that shows exactly how this works. It's told through a series of images about a young ox herder and his ox. The story begins with the herder standing alone, confused and anxious. His ox is gone. He doesn't know when he lost it, doesn't know where it went, doesn't even know where to begin looking. But he knows something essential is missing from his life, something he needs desperately to find before he can truly be okay. So he begins searching. He searches everywhere, through valleys, up mountains, across rivers, through forests thick with trees where visibility ends after a few steps. He asks every person he meets, "Have you seen my ox? He follows rumors and suggestions, traveling miles based on second-hand information that usually leads nowhere. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. The searching becomes his whole life. Every morning he wakes up thinking about the ox he's lost. Every evening he goes to sleep discouraged that another day has passed without finding it. He grows increasingly desperate, increasingly exhausted, increasingly convinced that his life can't really begin until he recovers what's been taken from him. This is how most of us live. Convinced that something essential is missing, that we've lost access to contentment or peace or okayness, and if we could just find the right thing, the right job, the right relationship, the right amount of money, the right solution to this problem, then we'd finally have what we need to be happy. One day, after years of fruitless searching, the herder is walking through a forest he's searched many times before. His feet are tired, his heart is heavy, and he's beginning to lose hope that he'll ever find what he's looking for. Then he sees something on the ground that makes him stop completely. Tracks. Fresh ox tracks in the soft earth, clear as anything, leading deeper into the trees. His exhaustion vanishes instantly. His heart leaps in his chest. Finally, after all this time, finally evidence. Finally, a clue about where to look. He follows the tracks with renewed energy, certain the ox must be just ahead, just around the next tree, just beyond the next clearing. The tracks wind through the forest, sometimes clear, sometimes faint, but always leading forward. He follows them for what feels like hours, his anticipation building with each step. He's so close now. He can feel it. Then he enters a small meadow, and there it is. The ox. His ox, standing peacefully in the afternoon light, grazing on grass, completely unconcerned, exactly where it's supposed to be. But something about seeing it stops the herder completely. He doesn't rush forward to grab it. He just stands there at the edge of the clearing, watching and slowly understanding something that changes everything. The ox was never lost. It hadn't run away. It hadn't been stolen. It hadn't disappeared or abandoned him or vanished into thin air. It was just being an ox, grazing when hungry, resting when tired, moving naturally through its days, without drama or urgency or any sense that something was wrong. The herder had convinced himself the ox was lost, that something essential was missing, that he needed to search desperately to recover what had been taken from him. But the ox was nearby the whole time, peacefully existing, and the only thing keeping them apart was the herder's panic and his frantic searching and his absolute certainty that what he needed wasn't already here. He'd spent years searching for something he already had. All that exhaustion, all that desperation, all that suffering, none of it was necessary. He was chasing something that was never actually missing. This is what we do. We're convinced that contentment is lost, that happiness is somewhere else, that peace is something we used to have, or might have, in the future, but definitely don't have right now. So we search, we chase achievements, we pursue pleasures, we accumulate possessions, we build relationships, we try to fix our bodies and our circumstances and our lives, certain that the next thing will finally be what restores what we're missing. But what if you're not missing anything? What if the contentment you're seeking is already available, right now, in this moment, as it actually is, and the only thing keeping you from it is your long list of requirements about how this moment needs to be different before you allow yourself to feel it? This is where Buddhist teaching gets radical. Not in some abstract philosophical way, but in a way that changes your actual daily experience, if you're willing to try it. Take every preference you're carrying, every demand about how things should be, every requirement for your satisfaction, all your ideas about what needs to be present for you to be okay, the perfect temperature, the right energy level, pleasant interactions, things going smoothly, your body feeling good, achieving what you wanted, being treated fairly, circumstances cooperating with your plans. All of it, every single condition you place on your contentment, imagine gathering it up and putting it in a bag. Not sorting through it, not keeping the reasonable requirements and discarding the unreasonable ones, not refining your standards into better versions. Just taking the whole mechanism of requiring things to be certain ways before you can be okay and putting it in the bag. Then tie the bag closed and throw it away. Just release it entirely. This whole system of checking whether conditions meet your standards, this constant evaluation of whether what's happening is good enough, this exhausting work of measuring reality against your requirements and finding it lacking. What happens when you do this? You don't become passive or lose all standards or accept everything without discernment. What happens is you become free. Free from the constant background anxiety about whether conditions will meet your requirements. Free from the automatic disappointment when things don't go as expected. Free from exhausting yourself trying to control everything to match your preferences. Free from the suffering of demanding that reality be different than it is. You can have the adequate meal instead of requiring the perfect meal, and discover that adequate actually nourishes you just fine. You can have the cloudy day instead of requiring sunshine, and discover that clouds have their own beauty when you're not resenting them for not being sun. You can have the imperfect rest instead of requiring ideal conditions, and discover that your body rests anyway when you stop demanding it to be different. Buddhist teaching says, happiness doesn't come from satisfying desires, it comes from reducing desires. Not satisfying them better or more efficiently, reducing them, having fewer in the first place. Think about medicine when you're sick. Does it matter what the medicine tastes like? Maybe it's bitter, Maybe it makes you slightly nauseous. Maybe the texture is unpleasant. Do you refuse it because you don't like how it tastes? Of course not. The taste is completely irrelevant when what matters is whether the medicine heals you. Life works the same way. What matters isn't whether each moment feels pleasant or meets your preferences. What matters is whether you're present with your actual life as it's actually unfolding, which turns out to be the only life available to live. When you release your requirements, when you stop placing conditions on your contentment, when you throw away the bag of demands, what remains is a simple capacity to be here with what is. And there's a lightness to that, a relief, like you've been carrying something heavy your whole life, and someone finally told you that you're allowed to put it down. The weekend doesn't have to be perfect to be good. The meal doesn't have to meet 10 conditions to nourish you. The evening doesn't have to align perfectly to offer rest. Your day doesn't need 100 things to go right for you to be fundamentally okay. What if 5 things, or 3 things, or 1 thing? What if that's actually enough? What if the ox was never lost at all, and all this frantic searching has been keeping you from seeing what's already here? Now, before you think this means becoming passive or having no standards, here's the critical distinction. You're lying in bed at 11:30 at night, desperately needing sleep because tomorrow's important, but your mind won't stop. Thoughts keep coming, replaying today's conversations, planning tomorrow's tasks, worrying about next week's deadline. You've tried everything, different positions, counting breaths, telling yourself to relax, but sleep won't come. You feel the frustration building, that sense of your body betraying you. In your mind, you're demanding, just sleep,